I always thought the people who loved my child would never give me a reason to question them. Family was supposed to be the one place where everything felt safe, predictable, steady, and loyal. But all it took was one unexpected text to shatter that belief. A message so casual, so dismissive, that it didn't just catch me off guard, it cut deeper than I was prepared for. My mom told me they were skipping my kid's birthday because money's tight. No apology. No emotion. Just a simple explanation, as if my child's happiness was nothing more than an optional expense they couldn't be bothered with. I told her it was no problem, that I understood. But deep down, something felt wrong. Something didn't line up. And that tiny, uneasy feeling started growing, twisting into a knot I couldn't ignore. Because when a family pulls away without warning, there's always a reason. And sometimes, it's not the one they're willing to admit. I didn't expect what I discovered next. I didn't expect the lies, the secrets, or the betrayal that had been happening quietly behind my back. I didn't expect to learn that the people I thought would stand with me were doing something else entirely. But once I knew the truth, there was no going back. And what I did afterward wasn't out of anger, it was out of something much colder, much clearer. So the real question is, what would you do if the people who were supposed to love your child the most turned out to be the ones hurting them the deepest? Before everything unraveled, my life felt steady in a way that almost made me believe nothing could shake it. I was a single mom doing my best, building a small but comfortable life for my child and me. Our days had a rhythm, mornings spent rushing through breakfast and school drop-offs, afternoons juggling work and errands, and evenings filled with the soft chaos only kids can bring. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours, and I was proud of how far we'd come. My mom and the rest of my family played a constant role in that daily rhythm. They weren't perfect, but they were present, or at least I thought they were. Birthdays, holidays, random weekend visits, all of it painted a picture of a close-knit family that cared. I depended on that closeness more than I admitted. It made raising a child on my own feel less lonely. It made me feel like no matter how hard things got, someone would always have our backs. On the surface, everything looked normal. I worked a steady job from home, balancing spreadsheets with snack times. My child spent afternoons drawing on the living room floor, unaware of the stress that sometimes tugged at me. Money wasn't always easy, but we managed. I learned how to stretch groceries, how to fix things myself, how to keep going even when exhaustion felt heavier than usual. Through all of it, I believed my family understood what it meant to show up, to support each other, to put love before convenience. Looking back, there were subtle changes, tiny moments I brushed off because I didn't want to read too deeply into them. Missed calls, shorter visits, a kind of distance in their voices that made me wonder if something was wrong, but not enough to worry. I assumed people get busy, life gets hectic, and not everything is a sign of something deeper. I told myself I was imagining it. But that feeling, that quiet little knot of uncertainty, kept showing up. Not loud enough to confront, but strong enough to linger. As my child's birthday approached, I threw myself into planning. Nothing extravagant, just something warm and joyful, something that would make them feel celebrated. Balloons, their favorite cake, a few friends, and of course, my family. They had always been there, smiling in photographs, singing off-key, making memories with us. I didn't question whether they'd come. It wasn't even a thought that crossed my mind, which is why that text hit differently. It didn't match the family I thought we were. It didn't fit the story I'd been telling myself about loyalty and support. It felt abrupt, dismissive, and strangely unbothered. And as much as I tried to shake it off, part of me couldn't understand how money, something they had never struggled with, was suddenly the reason they'd skip a child's birthday. Still, I replied kindly. I didn't want to make anyone uncomfortable. I didn't want to seem dramatic. I told myself there had to be an explanation I wasn't seeing. Something harmless. Something reasonable. But deep down, something shifted. It was a subtle crack, the kind you don't recognize until it spreads. A sense that the version of my family I'd been holding on to might not match reality. And even though I didn't know it yet, that text wasn't just a message. It was the beginning of something far bigger, something that would peel back layers I didn't realize existed. I wasn't prepared for what I was about to uncover. I wasn't prepared for how quickly trust could turn into something sharp and painful. And I certainly wasn't prepared for the way it would change me. The days after that text felt strangely heavy, like the air around me had thickened. I tried to brush it off and stay focused on my child's birthday, but the uneasiness kept creeping back in. It wasn't just their absence, it was the way my mom had said it. As if my child's birthday was nothing more than an optional appointment she could cancel without a second thought.
As if we didn't matter the way we used to.
Still, I kept my smile on for my child. I decorated the house with the streamers they picked, arranged the cupcakes in a careful little ring, and tried to convince myself that everything was fine. And in a way, it was. The party was small but full of laughter.
My child was happy.
Their friends filled the house with noise and energy. For a moment, I almost forgot about the knot in my chest. Then the photos went up. I posted a handful of pictures on social media like I always did. My child smiling, blowing out candles, tearing open gifts with the kind of excitement only kids have. I wasn't expecting anything dramatic. Maybe a few comments. A handful of likes. But what I wasn't expecting were the notifications that came next.
My mom had posted something.
Not a message to me. Not a simple comment. A whole album, tagged publicly, of their wonderful day out. The date stamped across the post was the same day as my child's birthday. And it wasn't some emergency errand or quiet day at home. It was a luxury beach outing. New clothes. Brunch at a place I could never afford. Cocktails. Shopping bags lined up at their feet. Smiles, wide, carefree smiles, like skipping my child's birthday had been the easiest decision in the world. There it was. The truth they didn't even bother to hide. Money wasn't tight. I was interested. And something inside me cracked. I stared at the pictures, the sunlight in them bright enough to make my eyes sting. I read the caption over and over. Much needed family day. Couldn't miss this. Family day. Family. As if my child and I weren't part of that word. That night, after my child fell asleep with frosting still on their lip, I sat alone at the edge of the couch, scrolling through those photos until my stomach churned. Every image felt like a slap. Every laugh froze into something cruel. I didn't message them. I didn't comment. I didn't even react. The anger wasn't explosive. It was cold, a slow, sinking realization that the people I depended on didn't see us the way I thought they did. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine the possibility that the distance I'd been feeling wasn't in my head. It was intentional. Days passed before I heard from my mom again. She didn't mention the beach trip. She didn't mention the birthday. Instead, she sent a simple message asking if I could drive her to an appointment the following week. As if nothing had happened. As if I existed only when she needed something. That message didn't hurt. What hurt was how unsurprising it felt. But before I responded, before I even took a breath, another post went up. This one wasn't from her. It was from my sister. A video. A long one. My family laughing, clinking glasses, unwrapping fancy little gifts they'd exchanged just because. My sister zoomed in on my mom showing off a necklace, a delicate gold piece I knew cost more than my weekly groceries. And then, like a final twist of the knife, my sister's caption. So grateful for our tight little circle. No drama, no stress. No drama, no stress. And suddenly it clicked. The canceled birthday wasn't about money. It was about convenience. It was about them choosing a day without us. Choosing a version of family that didn't include me or my child. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. But I didn't lash out. I didn't scream. I didn't start a war. Instead, I started paying attention. I watched how often they only called when they wanted something. I noticed how I was never invited, only informed after events had passed. I realized how often I rearranged my life for them, while they barely offered scraps of effort for me. It became impossible to ignore. My role in the family wasn't daughter, sister, or equal. It was convenient. And once you see that truth clearly, you can't unsee it. The more I observed, the more I noticed how much they relied on me. Rides, babysitting, favors, errands, emotional support. I was the reliable one, the helper, the fallback. And they expected it. They felt entitled to it. That's when the idea first formed, not out of revenge, but out of clarity. I didn't need to punish them.
All I needed to do was stop showing up.
But even that felt too simple. They had taken something from my child, something irreplaceable. They had chosen their comfort over their own grandchild. They had lied, dismissed, and acted like we didn't matter. And pretending it didn't hurt didn't feel right anymore. So instead of creeping away quietly, I decided to let everything unfold naturally by giving them exactly what they had given me.
Distance.
Silence. Absence. But before I made my first move, something unexpected happened. Something that made everything far more complicated, far more painful, and far more revealing. Because just when I started pulling away, my family suddenly needed me. And what they needed wasn't small. It was big.
Urgent.
Desperate. The kind of situation where they assumed I would drop everything, like I always had. But this time, I didn't react emotionally. I didn't rush. I watched. I waited. And for the first time, I let them feel the weight of their own choices. Because they thought skipping a child's birthday was harmless. They thought a lie about money being tight was forgettable. They thought I would always forgive, always bend, always stay. They were wrong. And as their situation spiraled, one thing became painfully clear. They had no idea just how far I was willing to go to make sure they never treated my child like an afterthought again. What happened next didn't just change our family dynamic, it exposed truths none of us were prepared to face. Are you ready to hear how everything finally snapped? When my family's crisis finally reached me, it came in a frantic, late-night message, one that lit up my phone long after I had put it down for the evening. My sister's name flashed across the screen, followed by a string of panicked notifications. I ignored the first few, thinking it was another minor inconvenience they wanted me to fix, another problem they expected me to clean up. But then I saw the final message. Mom collapsed.
We need you.
Please answer. For a moment, everything inside me froze. My heart thumped against my ribs, and that familiar instinct, the one to jump up, rush over, save the day, slammed hard against the wall I had built inside myself. I sat there in the dim light of my living room, staring at the screen, feeling the weight of years pressing on me. All those times they needed something. All those times I rearranged my life while they treated my child like an afterthought. And then I remembered the beach photos, the necklace, the laughs, the word family, used like a private club we weren't invited to. My hands trembled, but not with panic, with realization. They needed me because suddenly I wasn't optional. It wasn't convenient. I was essential. And I didn't move. Not immediately. Instead, I slowly stood up, took a breath, and walked through my quiet home, past the balloons still wilting from my child's birthday, past the photos on the wall, past the memories that felt so different now. I wasn't heartless. I wasn't cruel. But I wasn't going to run to them in the middle of the night, as if the wounds they left hadn't changed something fundamental inside me. If they wanted me there, they were going to feel the distance they'd created. It took me nearly an hour to finally text back, not because I was debating what to say, but because I needed that moment to understand what I was truly doing. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was showing them the truth. I wasn't theirs to take for granted anymore. I typed a simple message. I just saw this. What happened? My sister replied instantly, her text frantic and messy. Mom had collapsed at a relative's dinner. They rushed her to the hospital. They didn't know what was wrong. They needed someone to calm things down, to step in, to take over, because no one in that room could handle the pressure. Not like I always had. Everything in me wanted to get dressed, grab my keys, and go. But I stayed seated. Their urgency didn't erase what they had done. Their panic didn't rewrite the months of silence, exclusion, and lies. And the more they begged, the more I realized they were terrified not just of the situation, but of facing it alone. For the first time, they needed someone the way I had needed them on my child's birthday. And I let the moment stretch. When I finally arrived at the hospital, the tension around me was palpable. My sister ran toward me the second I walked in, her eyes swollen, her voice shaking. My arrival was a relief to her, Too much of a relief, the kind that comes from depending on someone without appreciating them. She talked fast, explaining everything, but her words blurred as I found my mother lying pale and exhausted on the hospital bed. She opened her eyes when she heard me enter, and something flickered there. Guilt, or maybe fear. I didn't know. But what I did know was this. For the first time in my life, she didn't look at me like the reliable daughter she could call on whenever she pleased. She looked at me like someone she had pushed too far. I stood next to her quietly, letting the silence speak. Letting her feel the distance I'd felt for so long. Letting her wonder if I'd show up for her the way she never did for my child. She whispered something soft, something like an apology, but I didn't bend down to hear it. I stayed upright, my arms crossed, my expression unreadable. My sister watched me closely, waiting for me to take over, to fix everything, to be the glue again. But I didn't move. I didn't soothe. I didn't rescue. I let them sit in the reality they had created. When the doctor arrived, he explained that my mom would be fine. A scare, not a tragedy. Stress, dehydration, and poor habits catching up with her. Nothing life-threatening. Nothing irreversible. And that's when something inside me clicked with a cold, steady clarity. They had built a life where I was invisible until I was needed. They had excluded me while expecting my unconditional loyalty. They had lied to me, used me, and treated my child like a footnote. But when the tables turned, even slightly, they crumbled. And that was the moment I understood my revenge wasn't going to be loud. It wasn't going to be messy. It wasn't going to be dramatic. My revenge was going to be absent. My revenge was going to be boundaries. My revenge was going to be walking away from the role they forced me into and letting them experience the world without the daughter who held everything together. So when my sister asked me if I could stay the night to help, I met her eyes and calmly said, "I can't. I have my own life to take care of." Her face fell. My mother's eyes widened. The room seemed to freeze. And that's when the true turning point hit them. I wasn't angry. I wasn't emotional. I wasn't raising my voice. I was simply done. I left that hospital room with a quiet that felt heavier than any scream. As the door closed behind me, I knew everything had changed, not because I forced it to, but because I finally stopped enabling the people who never showed up for me. But as I walked toward the parking lot, my phone buzzed again. A message that would complicate everything, a message that would challenge the boundaries I had just built. A message that would force me to confront what letting go really meant. And it wasn't from my family. It was from someone I never expected. When I stepped out of that hospital and into the cool night air, I expected to feel triumphant. I expected the power of my silence, my boundaries, my withdrawal to hit me like a rush of victory. But instead, I felt something quieter, heavier, something that lingered long after the fluorescent lights faded behind me. The message waiting on my phone wasn't from my mother, or my sister, or anyone who had taken advantage of me for years. It was from someone who had watched me struggle silently, someone who had seen me bend until I nearly broke. A friend, a distant cousin, a neighbor. It doesn't matter who. It matters what they said. You don't have to carry them anymore. Simple words. But they hit harder than any apology I never received. For so long, I had believed that family was something I owed myself to, something sacred, unbreakable, unquestionable. I believed that loyalty meant enduring hurt quietly. I believed that if I kept giving, eventually someone would give back. But walking away from the hospital, I realized the truth I had been avoiding for years. Revenge isn't always about getting even. Sometimes, it's about letting go before the damage becomes permanent. In the days that followed, I didn't block my family. I didn't confront them. I didn't unleash my anger or demand explanations they would twist anyway. Instead, I did something much more powerful. I stopped showing up. I canceled the little errands they assumed I'd do. I didn't reply to the casual messages asking for favors. I didn't offer rides, support, or time I didn't have. I watched from a distance as they tried to patch the hole my absence left, fumbling with responsibilities they never noticed I carried for them. And slowly, the power dynamic shifted. They began reaching out, Not with entitlement, but with hesitation. Not with demands, but with questions. Not with confidence, but with uncertainty. My mom sent long messages I didn't respond to right away. She apologized for misunderstandings, for the birthday thing, for how things have felt lately. None of it was the truth. None of it was an admission of what they had done, but it was the closest she had ever come to accountability. My sister, usually so defensive, tried to make conversation. Little check-ins. Attempts at friendliness. Attempts at connection. But I didn't rush back. I didn't throw myself into their arms. I didn't erase the distance I had fought so hard to create. Instead, I let them sit in it. Because the truth is, people don't change when you forgive them too quickly. They change when they lose access to the parts of you they took for granted. My revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a single explosive confrontation. It was a quiet shift in the foundation of our relationship, a refusal to let them play the same roles in my life. And the impact wasn't just on them.
It was on me.
I felt lighter. I felt stronger. I felt present in my own life again. Most importantly, I focused on my child, the one person who always deserved the best of me. I poured time into our routines, our memories, our milestones. I realized how much energy I had wasted trying to belong to a family that had already drawn their circle without me. And when they eventually asked if they could make things right, when they asked to see my child, when they tried to fold themselves back into our lives, I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I said, we'll see. Because forgiveness isn't something you hand out like a spare key. It's something you rebuild slowly, brick by brick, after the damage has been acknowledged, not ignored. And that's where my story ends, not with a dramatic twist or a perfect justice, but with a choice. A boundary. A new beginning that had nothing to do with vengeance and everything to do with reclaiming my power. People think revenge is about hurting someone back. But sometimes, the truest revenge is refusing to shrink yourself anymore. Refusing to hold your breath in relationships that suffocate you. Refusing to give the most vulnerable parts of yourself to people who haven't earned them. So now, I ask you, what would you do if the people you trusted the most showed you exactly where you stood in their lives? Would you keep giving until there's nothing left? Or would you finally take back your place in your own story? Because sometimes, the revenge you think you want isn't nearly as powerful as the peace that comes from walking away and meaning it.